Forgiveness and redemption. It's a common story. We see it in The Lion King. We see it lots of places. Ernest Hemingway, he's a pretty famous writer, and he wrote this cracking story. 1930s this was. It was about a father and a son. Go on, give me 5 minutes, Archie. I'll see if I can keep you locked in. And he tells this story about a man and his son, Paco, and Paco had gone off like, oh, I'm done with you, Dad. I'm going off to be a matador, because they lived in Spain and that was fine. And Paco went off to Madrid. It's fine. You absolutely don't have to. But it would, it might be interesting enough. Sorry, Theo. Give me 5 minutes, Theo. Paco went off to try and be a matador, as young people will do. I guess like running away to the circus or some such over here. And his dad realised that he'd got this wrong. He'd been too bossy and too mean. So he went to Madrid and he put a note in the paper. He said, "Dear Paco, all is forgiven. Meet me at midday tomorrow in front of the newspaper office." Paco was a relatively common name in 1930s Spain. The father got there the next day, and there were 800 Pacos there. He said, the dad said, everything is forgiven, and everybody wanted to hear that. It's an incredible story. Absolutely incredible. Forgiveness is everywhere, and our need for it is everywhere. And there is nothing and no one beyond God's forgiveness and redemption. The message this morning is simple. You are loved. You are really, really loved. And we're going to look at those two Bible stories. There's a bit of colouring and drawing and writing to do later, but if you've already coloured in on your bit of paper by the time we get to it, that's fine, and we've got more paper. But you'll see what that's for. We're going to come to that story about Jesus and Peter first. And this is, I think, an incredible story. So we didn't hear it here, but earlier in the Easter story, you probably know, do you remember how Peter behaved when Jesus was arrested? Do we remember that? He wasn't very good. Peter had said to Jesus, how did he behave? What did he do? And Peter said, yeah. So Jesus said to Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter said, no, I won't do that. But then he did. Yes, good Bible knowledge. He did. And he saw in that story of Peter saying, I don't know the man, one of the bits that was really important is that Peter sees Jesus seeing him. Peter knows Jesus knows that he's done that he's let him down, that he has really let his friend down in a hard way. I don't know about you. I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up for this. This is not a question you need to join in with. But have you ever let down your friends or your family or the people who love you? I bet you have, because that's part of what it is to be human. And it's hard. I know when people have let me down, I'm okay with forgiving them, actually. Sometimes it takes work, sometimes that's hard, but I would rather be the person who's been let down and having to forgive than I would be the person who's got to go to someone and say, oh, I got this wrong. I have let you down and I can see how much I hurt you. That is just, I can't think of much worse than that. It's pretty bad. And can you imagine being Peter, knowing that this person that he loved and he'd been following around, and he knows that Jesus knows he's done this, and he's filled with guilt and shame. If I have that moment, I would want to run away and go, I'd have to psych myself up. I'd have to say, right, come on, Rob. Big boy trousers on now. It's hard work, that. And I might just send them an email or just, I don't know. If you're a young boy, I remember when I did this, I would go up to my friend and punch them because that's how men start conversations about emotions. Or you would get there and you'd say, it's not my fault, I'm sorry, there were men there with swords. Look, it wasn't me, honest it wasn't. Have you ever stood in front of a teacher or in front of your friend and made excuses and said, it's not my fault, sorry, or didn't really mean it? And he doesn't, he just goes to Jesus and he's with him. He runs towards the person he's got to say sorry to. We give Peter a lot of stick for being a bit of an idiot sometimes in the Gospels. And it's useful that he's there to remind us that you haven't got to get it all right. But this is a moment of courage to say, I let you down and I'm going towards you. I think that's brilliant. And here's the clever bit that Jesus does. He It's how they talk. Sometimes when we say sorry, you'll go, no, don't worry about it. And I'm trying to learn in our house, we've set a rule. If somebody says sorry, what you say is, thank you. You don't say it's nothing if it's not nothing. The way we talk is important. But when Peter goes to him, what Jesus does is even better. He gets Peter to say, I love you, 3 times. There are ways that you talk to yourself that help you, and ways that you talk to yourself that don't help you. And this is pretty modern cognitive neuroscience. Scientists have worked out that you listen to the words that come out of your mouth, that you can physically affect your mood in the words that you say, right? That is indisputable science, that we can start to affect our own mood by how we talk to ourselves. Jesus seems to know this 2,000 years before functional MRI scanners and that. Isn't that amazing? Unsurprising that the maker of the universe knows how our brains work. So he says to Peter, do you love me? I think so that Peter can hear himself saying, I love you. No, but Peter, do you love me? Yes, I love you. Peter, do you love me? Yes, I love you. Shh, stop asking. He has to say it so many times that he believes it. And that's what puts it right. But this is the amazing thing. We have snacks, don't forget. We have snacks for toddlers if anybody needs them, or indeed high chairs if you need a place to sit and munch on something. We're happy to help. He doesn't just say to Peter, it's going to be all right, and get him back to like where he was before. This is the message today. He restores Peter, and after this, he says, Peter, you're going to be the boss now. You're going to lead the church. You're going to feed my flock. You're going to be the person, one of the people who explodes this new way of life. He takes Peter's brokenness and he's sorry, and he uses this talk and gets him, he's fine. That's fine. Okay, that's less fine. And he turns Peter into even more of who he was always called to be, into being the leader of the church. Even though he's warned Peter, like, if you do this, you're going to be taken out and crucified at the end of your life. That's what he's talking about, this death. That's an incredible thing. This is what Jesus does. He doesn't just forgive us and get us back to where we were. He forgives us and redeems us and transforms us and opens up new calling, new hope. We heard the story of Saul. Again, we didn't get the whole story. We get Saul's on his way to Damascus. He's looking for Christians because he doesn't like them. And you might know some of the other stories of Paul. He's been rounding them up to arrest them and then have them killed and stand by and help them to kill Christians. And Paul was a faithful Jew. Paul knew that if you were brought up in that society, you'll have known that all human beings were made in the image of God and should be treated with respect and with love. But what Paul did, he has othered them. These Christians are getting it wrong. And once you've othered people, like, they're not human, you can treat them how you like. Othering is at the root of all badness that goes on in the world, I think. It's what happens in schools, it's what happens between countries. If somebody's bullying, we've said those people don't matter. And that's what Paul's done. And then suddenly, Jesus appears to him. He's like, oh, what have I done? He'd been trying to follow God, and suddenly he's caught up, he's confronted with the truth and knows what I've been doing is hurting people who are God. Jesus says, I'm those people you're chasing. I'm the others. Jesus is always the others. Jesus is always people in prison. He's murderers and those who are murdered. Jesus is always there. And Paul must have felt awful. What happens to Paul? He's forgiven. And he's restored, and he ends up being the person, like Peter is the apostle to the Jews, and he gets the church started there. Paul goes out and preaches to the others, those people that the church had always said, those guys are out there. He says, you know where I'm going? I'm going out there. He becomes even more of the person he was always called to be. He wants everyone to know the love of God, not just forgiven, redeemed and set free. And I think those have been the watchwords since I got here. We've been talking a lot about joy and calling, and that's where it is. Joy and calling lives in those moments when we realise something's gone wrong. We go, oh, and then you're redeemed and restored and set free, and that's where we find joy and where we can find our calling. And what are we sent to? Who are we sent to? Who are we sent to shine to? Might not seem like the most profound theological song, that one, but it is. We're sent to shine. People talk about Christianity. Someone said this to me recently. Christianity is a pretty tough sell sometimes. It's all well and good us coming to church. I'm struggling with the fact that I can't tell people if they become a Christian their life's going to get any better. Because it's not. You know, person Adam met became a Christian, wasn't immediately released from prison. Okay, the circumstances of your life didn't change overnight. If you're poor and you become a Christian, you don't immediately suddenly get rich. If you're sick and you become a Christian, you don't immediately get healed. If you become a Christian, you step into the church, I think there is help, and we can help you with lots of those things. But your life doesn't get better. You will still get poorly. Bad things will still happen to you if you're a Christian. But what you do get is loved by God and by the rest of us. That's the plan. That's what this church is about. We're here to love Calverley. You get forgiven and restored and redeemed and sent out to do whatever it is that you are put here to do. He didn't promise us an easy life, but a redeemed one. I know before I was a Christian, I did plenty of things I regret, and the worst ones were the things I did that I hurt other people. I think I regret even more the things I've done since I became a Christian, because I'm supposed to know better. I think I do fewer of them now. I think God is at work in me. I think I am less mean and spiteful and selfish than I was, but I'm still working on that stuff. I am still occasionally letting people down and hurting them when I should know better. But periodically, I get a chance, and it is often in church. You can meet God anywhere. And Victoria likes to meet God on mountaintops. And there's people who are not here today who I know are on some of the 3 peaks, and God bless them in that other church they're out there. But there are times when I meet God here in church, and there's stuff that I need to deal with because I'm like, I've hurt people there. And what we're going to give you to do today is a chance to maybe put some of that stuff down. If there's anything left in you, however old you are, anytime you said to anybody, I was mean to you and I'm upset you or I'm sorry, then we can put that stuff down. We're going to give you a bit of paper and a pen and write that stuff down. And then when we get to communion, you can come up. And I've got a shredder. It's good to be physical with our prayers. That's why Christians have been crossing themselves for years. That's why Christians have been kneeling down for years. Take your stuff, and you might want to write down a thing that you did, fold it so no one can see, and shred it. And at the end of the service, I'm going to take this shredded stuff, and I'm going to burn it, and it will be gone. You might want to do that. The other thing you might want to do with your bit of paper, and this is why you can have 2 bits of paper. You might need to be a bit like Peter. And Jesus is saying to you, I love you. You might want to write that down. Jesus loves me. I am loved. Maybe you're Peter and Jesus is saying to you, do you love me? And you want to write down, I do. I love you. And you can keep that bit of paper. Stick it on your fridge. Stick it in your wallet. Stick it somewhere you'll see it and remember that little bit of faith at the midst of it. Because you can have murdered people or let your friends down or been mean to them, and God could not love you any more than he does. He loves you so much just the way you are. Too much, they say, to leave you the way you are, but he really does love you.